Chapter 1. By Friday afternoon, after a week of careful thought, Michael Prasad had come up with just one theory for how he might make it to Monday morning without getting grounded for the rest of his life. Hypothesis, he thought. Parents might be so excited to find out you've succeeded at something that they forget they said you absolutely, positively, under no circumstances were allowed to try. That was a stretch, he had to admit, and it raised the obvious question of whether he would have been better off sitting in the library studying for his Martian history exam, like he'd told his mom he was doing, instead of standing near the main colony airlocks with his helmet under his arm. Based on the puzzled looks he was getting, he wasn't the only one wondering why he was here. Michael was too old to be with a crowd of grade school kids clutching their parents' hands, and he was too young to be one of the high schoolers, talking and laughing down by the airlock doors. Michael kept his face expressionless. Why would he care what anyone else thought? He wasn't here to make new friends. Michael walked over to the end of the plaza, where the transparent dome that covered Heimdall marked the edge of the colony. The sky outside was bright pink from end to end. On a nearby landing pad, a big cargo jump ship sat slightly askew as workers in environment suits repaired one of its landing legs. Little mounds of red sand piled up like anthills against the base of the dome, shifting back and forth in the wind. He reached out and pressed his fingers against the smooth, icy cold surface of the dome. The transplastic bent slightly at his touch. And when he pulled his hands back, 10 small indentations remained. Slowly, the material stretched back into its original shape, leaving no sign that it had ever been disturbed. "You can touch it?" asked a red-haired boy, who looked like he was around 9 or 10 years old. He was standing a few meters away, watching Michael with an amazed expression, as if he'd just seen some kind of magic trick. "Sure," Michael said. "It won't hurt you." The boy reached out and ran one finger over the surface of the dome. He pulled it back quickly and rubbed his hand against his pants. "It's cold." "Well, it's -60 outside," Michael said. "I've only been outside twice," the boy admitted, "but I've done a lot of simulations." "You'll be fine," Michael said, because he knew this was the sort of thing he was supposed to say to a kid who was nervous about taking the suit test. The boy nodded, clearly reassured. But all of this felt backward to Michael, as if he were in some kind of alternate universe. Someone was supposed to be here reassuring him, not the other way around. "How old were you when you went outside for the first time?" the boy asked. 6. The boy's eyes went wide. Even in Heimdall, most 6-year-old kids were playing soccer or swimming in the colony pool, not going out onto the surface. Of course, most kids didn't have Manish Prasad for a father. Michael was pretty sure if they'd made environment suits for toddlers, his dad would have taken him outside before he could walk. He'd gone with his dad on dozens of hikes and camping trips, from Mount Olympus to Valles Marineris and everywhere in between. At this point, all of those trips out on the surface were a jumbled blur, except for the very last one, 2 years ago. That one was still crystal clear. The boy nodded at the high school kids. "Are you with them?" "No," Michael said, his face flushing. "They're taking the advanced suit test." Thankfully, the boy didn't follow up with any questions about why Michael actually was here. "My mom says the basic test is easy," the boy said. "She's a jump ship pilot, so she knows what she's talking about." Michael wanted to tell the boy that his mom was right. The basic suit test was easy. Environment suits were safe, especially the fully automated ones they gave kids. All they wanted to do was make sure that you wouldn't panic once they removed your tethering line. Every kid on Mars took the test when they were 10 years old, and nobody failed it. Almost nobody failed it. One of the older kids did a handstand and then flipped back down to his feet. The other high schoolers laughed and cheered. If any of them were anxious, they certainly weren't showing it. Hypothesis. For some people, the more nervous they get, the more relaxed they appear. He shook his head. Hypothesis. For some people, the more nervous they get, the more stupid hypotheses they come up with. I have to go, the boy said, looking back at the younger kids who were gathering around an instructor. Nice to meet you. Michael gave him a little salute. Good luck. He stood near the crowd of kids and parents and listened as the woman explained how the test would run. Even 2 years ago, the instructions had seemed laughably basic compared with the things his father had taught him. Michael remembered looking around at the other kids and wondering whether any of them would freak out when they were outside the dome. It hadn't even occurred to him that he might be the one to panic. Michael's handheld screen vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out and unfolded it. Incoming call from Peter Prasad. Relieved that it wasn't his mom or dad, Michael tapped the accept button and his older brother's face appeared. Peter, with his brown eyes and hooked nose, looked so much like their father that it was sometimes unnerving. Michael, on the other hand, had inherited just enough of his dad's dark skin and his mom's thin features that he didn't look like either one of them. At least over a video link, he and Peter were eye to eye, and his brother couldn't loom over him the way he liked to do in person. If you're going to try to change my mind, don't bother, Michael said. So, you're really going to do it, huh? Peter said, somehow managing to look both amused and concerned at the same time. You don't think it's a good idea to tell Mom and Dad first? No, Michael said, I don't. That conversation was one that he'd already had a dozen times over the past year. Someone with your condition was the precise phrase his mom liked to use. Someone with his condition shouldn't go out onto the surface. Someone with his condition should stay inside the domes where it was safe. And someone with his condition certainly had no business taking the environment suit test again. She always put a little emphasis on that word again, just to remind him of what had happened the first time. Is Dad home yet? Michael asked. He called and said he'd be late. He was trying to get everything wrapped up at the station. Michael pursed his lips. Wrapped up was a good term for it, except that his dad had it backward. It was the work that had him wrapped up. When their dad had taken the job out at the magnetic field station, their mom had given them a big talk about how it was an important position and how they needed to support him. The magnetic field created by the station protected everyone on the planet from solar radiation, so sure, it was important. But Michael also knew that his dad would be just as wrapped up if someone had asked him to clean the Heimdall colony dome with a squeegee. It was just how he was. Well, when he comes home, don't tell him where I am. I want to surprise him. Surprise him? Michael, just don't say anything to him, okay? Peter sighed. Look, I know what Dad promised you, but maybe he didn't mean it exactly the way you think. He did, Michael insisted. Fine. But don't be surprised when Mom and Dad lock you in your room for the next 3 years. Peter reached toward the camera, and the connection went dead. Michael crumpled up the screen and shoved it back into his pocket. His brother didn't understand. How could he? Everything was perfect for him. He was going to go into the Rescue Service Academy next year. Everyone said he was born to be out on the surface. He didn't have a condition. Gotta get through, he heard a familiar voice say from the other side of the plaza. Pardon, sorry about that. Excuse me. Down by the entrance, his friend Lilith was pushing her way through the crowd, ignoring the annoyed looks from some of the parents. Lilith had immigrated from Earth a few years earlier, and she still moved with the awkward, bouncing steps of someone who wasn't quite used to Mars's lower gravity. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail and fastened with a rubber band. "Sorry, gymnastics practice ran late," she said, as she jogged over to him. She stopped and scrunched up her face. "Are you okay? You look like my hamster at her vet appointment." "I'm fine." You need to relax." She rubbed his shoulders as if he were a low-gi judo wrestler. "What's the 19th digit of pi?" 4, Michael said. "What's the weight of Saturn?" 500 sextillion tons, except that it doesn't really have a weight since... Whatever, she said. "What's the surface area of the colony dome?" That one was harder. 56.5 square kilometers, he said after a moment. "Assuming it's a perfect half sphere 6 kilometers across." "You've got this sewn up," Lilith said. She jerked her head toward the high schoolers. "How many of those kids even know what the cube root of 27 is?" 3, Michael said automatically. 3? You think? She squinted dubiously at them. "No," he said. "I mean, the cube root of 27 is 3. Lilith laughed. "See? You're a lock." She put her hands against the dome and peered out at the Martian landscape. "Aren't you worried about that big solar flare everyone is talking about? I mean, is it even safe to go out there?" Michael glared at her. Was she trying to make him nervous? He really didn't need to add anything else to his list of things to worry about. He was about to reply when a voice interrupted him. "Hey!" someone called. "You there! With a helmet!" Michael turned and saw a man in an environment suit walking toward him with his helmet in one hand. The man had the leathery skin of someone who had spent too much time in high-radiation environments, and his hair was shaved down to a thin white stubble. Both of his eyes were artificial, and they made a faint whirring sound as they flicked back and forth. "You're here to take the test, right?" "Yes," Michael said, surprised. "Then come on, we're about to get started." The man jerked his head in the direction of the airlock. Michael looked around and saw that all of the other kids were gone, and the only other people left in the plaza were parents. He must have missed the announcement that the test was starting. His stomach clenched, and he swallowed hard. "Break a leg," Lilith said, pushing him gently in the direction of the prep room. Seeing his confused stare, she frowned. "That doesn't make much sense, does it? It's an Earther thing. It means good luck." Thanks," he mumbled. He picked up his helmet and walked into the room the man had indicated. Suits were hanging from racks, and helmets of various sizes were stacked in narrow cubbies behind the benches. Dusty boot prints crisscrossed the floor, and the acrid smell of the Martian atmosphere hung in the air. But instead of a crowd of younger kids, the only people inside were the 4 teenagers he'd seen earlier. Michael stopped in the doorway and looked around in confusion. "I hope there aren't any questions about metamaterials," one of the boys said, pulling an environment suit down from a rack. He was wearing a t-shirt for an Earther band that Michael vaguely recognized. "I can't keep any of that straight." "I spent all weekend trying to memorize the pressure tables," said the other boy. 17.2, 43.8. "You don't have to memorize that stuff, number. They let you look it up." A tall, broad-shouldered girl looked through the racks with a disgusted expression. "I really wish they'd let us wear our own suits." The other girl turned toward Michael. "Are you looking for someone?" she asked. She had long black hair and a nice smile. Michael shook his head. "I'm here for the test," he stammered. You're in the wrong place, the boy in the t-shirt said. This is the advanced test. It's not for little kids. How old are you? The dark-haired girl asked. 12, Michael said. But you have to be at least 16, don't you? One of the boys said. No, the dark-haired girl said. I read that a 10-year-old got her advanced certification once. Bollocks to that, said the boy in the earther t-shirt. I'm not taking this test with a little kid. Oh, poor Beecher, the dark-haired girl said. Worried that a 12-year-old is going to beat you? I'll beat his face in if he doesn't get out of here, Beecher said, glaring at Michael. Michael backed up a few steps and nearly ran into the white-haired man. Whoa, the man said. Is everything okay? This isn't right, Michael said. I'm supposed to be taking the basic test. The man raised his eyebrows. Michael could see the thought going through his head. Why was someone his age signed up for a test for 10-year-olds? Shrugging, the man nodded at the doors to the other airlock. I think you're too late. The test for the younger kids has already started. Too late? Michael echoed. After all this, he'd missed his chance to get his certification? Isn't there some way I can take it? I can't wait until the fall. I have to do it today. They're strict about starting on time, I'm afraid, the man said. But if you want, you can come out with us, and I'll give you your basic certification. Michael looked at the high school kids. It didn't really matter how he passed the test, did it? Going out with the advanced group would probably be more interesting than listening to someone teach a bunch of kids the right way to put on a helmet. And what was the alternative? He wasn't going to go home without his certification. Okay, he heard himself say. Michael followed the instructor back inside and sat down on a bench with his helmet in his lap. He could feel the older kids staring at him. The white-haired man closed the prep room door and cleared his throat. Listen up. This is the advanced suit exam administered by the Martian Emergency Rescue Service. My name is Randall Clark. I've spent most of my life in a suit. I've worked on Luna, in the Belt, and here on Mars. 5 years ago, I lost my lungs, my eyes, and my eardrums in a pressure suit accident off of Vesta. All of which has apparently convinced someone that I'm qualified to determine whether any of you actually know how to handle yourself out on the surface. Any questions? Nobody spoke. Then grab a suit and get ready. Full checks, hoots to boots. Randall rolled out a privacy screen that divided the prep room into 2 sections. Boys on this side, girls over there. Nervously, Michael walked along the rows of suits, looking for one in his size. Here you go, Beecher called from the other side of the room. Michael turned and was hit in the chest with a wadded-up suit. Grade school size, just for you. Michael ignored Beecher's chuckle and held up the suit. It was probably the closest to his size that he was going to find. He took off his clothes and fastened the suit around his legs and body. The wrist screen was a little bigger than he was used to, but the controls were all familiar to him. How much air do we need in our tanks? One of the girls asked from the other side of the screen. No tanks, Randall said. We're going to use filters only, just like you do on a long trip out. That was something Michael hadn't expected to worry about, since the basic test used standard tanks. But his dad had always preferred to use air vests and filters on camping trips, so Michael was familiar with how they worked. He grabbed a vest from a hook on the wall as Randall passed out carbon dioxide filters. Out of habit, Michael checked the saturation level on the filter, and then he slid it inside the port on the back of the suit's collar. Without a tank, he would be relying on the filter to suck in CO2 from the atmosphere and convert it to breathable air, since the liquid oxygen in the vest was only enough for emergencies. He picked up the clear bubble-shaped helmet he'd inherited from his brother. Its smooth transplastic surface was a little yellowed with age, but it was still in good shape, and it was familiar to him. This morning, he'd gone over its seals and insulation 4 or 5 times, but out of habit, he checked everything again. "Suit's a little big, huh?" Randall said from behind him, adjusting the straps on his air vest. "But don't worry about it. Henrik Arneson never had one that fit right. He was so short they had to stand him on boxes for the publicity photos." Michael nodded. It was a nice thing for Randall to say. But when Henrik Arneson became the first person to walk on Mars, he hadn't had to worry about a condition, had he? Michael stared at the helmet with a sense of dread. "Oh, you've done this before," he told himself. "Yes," a voice in the back of his mind replied. "And how did that go for you?" He took a deep breath and pulled the collar over his head. As soon as it sealed against his suit, everything went silent, and all he could hear was the tinny echo of his own breathing. Cold sweat dripped down the back of his neck. He hated this moment most of all. He fought the urge to tear the helmet off and suck in deep lungfuls of fresh air. After what seemed like an eternity, the suit powered on, and the sounds of the room came back, relayed from microphones in his collar. The air filter hummed, and fresh air flooded into his suit. He opened his eyes and saw Randall watching him. "Everything all right?" Randall asked. Michael fidgeted. He didn't want Randall to see how nervous he was. "I'm fine," he said, trying to sound confident. And it was the truth, wasn't it? All he needed to do was keep his nerves under control, and everything would be okay. Randall tapped the collar of Michael's helmet, where the name Prasad had been stenciled in black letters. "You're Manish Prasad's kid?" Michael blinked in surprise. "Do you know my dad?" Randall chuckled. "I was surprised when he let them talk him into running that field station. He never seemed like the type for a desk job. I was even more surprised when he convinced me to come along." "You work for him?" "I help out at the station, which mostly means making sure the scientists don't forget to put on their helmets before they go outside. But everyone in the rescue service knows your dad. Has he ever told you about how he fixed that leak in the old Hesperia habitat in the middle of a dust storm?" Michael shook his head. His dad hardly ever talked about the things he'd done in the service. "Well, ask him sometime. Though I bet he's pretty busy these days, isn't he? When I left the station this morning, everyone was pretty worked up over this flare." "The flare?" Michael looked at the airlock doors uneasily. He knew it was supposed to be a big one, but his dad hadn't mentioned anything about it the last time he'd called. Was that why he hadn't come home on time? Randall double-checked everyone's suits, pointing out any safety checks they'd missed or settings they'd gotten wrong. When they were all ready, he led them through a set of doors into the airlock itself. The hair on the back of Michael's neck stood on end. "Stop it," he told himself. "You're not even outside yet." When they'd all gathered inside, Randall closed the inner doors and pulled down on a large metal handle. Their suits crackled and stretched as the air pressure around them dropped to match the atmosphere outside. The gauge on the wall settled at 4,000 pascals, and the status light on the wall blinked green. The outer doors rumbled open. A thin slice of sunlight cut across the floor of the airlock, shining through a swirling cloud of dust. Michael's heart pounded in his chest. It was one thing to look out at the surface through the dome of the colony, but it was something else to actually be outside, surrounded by nothing but poisonous air, wearing a scratched-up helmet that seemed to be growing smaller by the second. Was the air in his suit already getting stale? Or was that just his imagination? He took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. He didn't care what stupid disorder his doctor said he had. He didn't care what had happened 2 years ago. He wasn't going to let himself panic. Slowly, the dust settled, revealing a long ramp that led up to the surface. Little drifts of copper-colored sand collected against the sides of the ramp, shifting back and forth in the wind. A sign at the top read, "You are now leaving the Heimdall Atmospheric Containment Zone." "Here we go," Randall said, and stepped out onto the Martian surface.